Thank you guys for coming out tonight to this event. In spite of the rain, we still made it here. Appreciate that. Those of you who heard me earlier, we were supposed to have two other speakers, John Bush and Catherine Bleich, who are from Austin, Texas. They're also now the owners of a bookstore called Brave New Books in Austin. Next time you're in Austin, go check out Brave New Books. It's an awesome place with a lot of freedom, liberty-minded people. Just a lot of books you wouldn't see other places, a lot of good health stuff, mix of good ideas and good people, and there's a really nice community around there. So they're active in Austin, and John is actually one of the people who helped inspire me in my activism, and I look forward to bringing him and Catherine back out here so they can talk about peaceful parenting. They're really big in unschooling. They have two awesome little kids who run around and are some of the happiest, most free kids I've ever seen. They just recently bought a bus and drove it back to New Hampshire, and now are in the process of moving into that bus and traveling using only Bitcoin. And John's also got some really great ideas on something called Freedom Cells, which is basically a really awesome way to organize individuals in groups of 8 to 10 people to really practically get things done, whether that means this month we're going to focus on getting 3 months worth of food, or this month we're going to focus on this skill, or whatever it is. And taking that idea and applying it in a lot of different areas, I'm excited about using that, and I really think people in Houston should get behind those ideas. And as I said, if you go to either tonight's Facebook event, you'll see the video. It's called Creating a Mutual Aid Society, or Central Texas Mutual Aid Society, or you can also go to consciousresistance.com, which is the network that I run. We're putting this event on, and you'll see John's videos there as well. And I really advise you guys to check that out, because I think that that's along with what I have to say and what Adam has to say, I think John also has some of the real practical, strategic steps that we can take towards creating a more free world. So yeah, check them out. Now I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about my book, which unfortunately the rain and the flooding, the package won't be here until tomorrow. But I will be taking pre-orders from you guys who are interested later after you hear my ideas. Maybe you'll be interested in hearing about this book and reading it for yourself. You can also download it for free, and I'll give you guys all that info. But first off, my name is Derrick Broze. For those of you who don't know me, I'm from here in Houston, and I've been an activist since early 2010, late 2009. Helped start the Houston Freethinkers community with a bunch of other great people, and over the years we've done political action, we've done protests, we've confronted politicians and Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger. Maybe some of you guys have seen us cuss out Henry Kissinger. But we've done all these different forms of activism, and personally for me, and I think really the group itself, we've found more solutions and more positive reaction through creation and through building. And so over the years, my activism has moved towards the ideas of agorism, of liberty, of freedom, of true freedom, of anarchy, self-governance, community governance, and again, a focus on solutions. Always trying to find whatever the problem is, looking towards my community and how can we work together to find an answer on this. And that's really where my focus has gone over the past couple years. In 2012, I went and interned with Adam in the DC area when he had his live show going on. A bunch of people living in the house. A bunch of crazy people living in the house putting on a full-time anarchist talk show. So that was fun times, and I learned a lot. And me and Adam worked together through various forms of activism at the airport and other places. And then also after his shotgun incident, I went and hosted his show while he was in jail for a period of time. I was out there for a month, so got to work a lot with Adam and as well with John and Kat. So I really feel like this is a good event. These are good people to work with because our ideas, I feel like, have sort of evolved, not necessarily together, but through our work together. I think we've fed ideas back and forth to each other, and I really appreciate that. So it's been quite an experience, and for me, over time, I've moved towards this idea that I came to call the conscious resistance. So tonight, basically, this talk is what is the conscious resistance. The book was co-written by myself and my friend John Vibes, who's in Maryland. It's called The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. And as far as I know, it's the only book that's ever tried to look at these two topics, spirituality, not religion, but spirituality, and just the search for a deeper meaning and looking for answers in our universe and our life, and how that translates and connects to the search for freedom in the physical sense. And John and I, over the last couple years, have had conversations and podcasts and interviews and stuff where we really developed these ideas and came to understand that both of us were interested in the ideas of shamanism and indigenous teachings, as well as voluntarism and liberty, and started to see some connections between this path and this search for meaning in the world, and also trying to rectify some of the answers that we've found through our experiences with psychedelics, maybe magic mushrooms or LSD or flotation tanks or meditation, other experiences that showed both of us that there was some sort of a deeper thing in the world going on beyond just the physical sense. So over time, all these ideas just coalesced into one thing, and around the summer, June 2012, I could no longer separate these worlds of mine, my interest in meditation and involvement with the spiritual community in Houston, and my interest in activism and working in the political world. I just couldn't separate it anymore. It became like one thing. And I couldn't sleep for a few days, and then the idea of the conscious resistance was born. I was like, I need to enlighten myself and other people, and then we can do these things. And basically, I've come to see that I believe truly that the ideas and the principles of libertarianism, and taken to the fullest extent to self-governance, to anarchy, I believe those ideas are possible, and they may seem utopian and idealistic at this point, but that's only because there's a lot of deeper healing that each of us on an individual level need to do before these ideas will be feasible. There's this, in Buddhism, there's this idea of samsara. Samsara is the endless cycle of life and death. This is, what's your goal in some forms of Buddhism. Your goal is to escape that, to escape samsara through various practices. And I see this with our commonly held belief in worship of the state, what many of us know as statism across this country. I see that with statism. People are, over time, we've forgotten history, we've forgotten examples of people living without governance and living more freely, and so we've come to believe that what we have right now is the ultimate pinnacle of what we can create, and this is the best governance that we can get. People say if you don't like this country, leave it, America's the best place, this type of thinking. And I feel like that's silly, for one, because if you do study history and you do look back and you start to understand these ideas, you see that not only are they intrinsic in who we are as people, that we're meant to be free, we're meant to come together, to work together, but these ideas have worked in the past, and there have been communities that have lived with either no government or very little governance and direct community governance. And I see this cycle of statism as what I call state samsara. It's just that constant. In the same way, it's a constant cycle of looking for one leader. There's revolution, and the revolutionaries become the new state, or people beg for a new leader because we've been taught that there is no other way. And so my goal with my activism and writing, and I think others who sort of step into this role or choose to put the message of freedom out there, is to try to put this idea back into the minds of people. That's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to spread this message so that we can get to a point where the masses understand that there is something beyond just government. There is something post-government, that when a shitstorm hits the city and FEMA's not around, people will take care of each other, and we can find better ways to organize to have that spontaneous order. So my goal with the conscious resistance, and the conscious resistance idea led to the creation of a website, a network, the Conscious Resistance Network, theconsciousresistance.com. It's myself and a team of other writers and bloggers, and we just put these ideas out from philosophy, liberty, consciousness, spirituality, psychedelics. You'll find a mix of ideas there. And so it's grown, and when I started to give these talks and these ideas out there to a largely anarchist, atheist crowd, I was actually surprised when I was met with a positive response, and more people started to reach out to me and said they were interested in meditation, or that they were feeding me information. They asked me, hey, have you seen the similarities between the Tao and anarchy? Have you seen the similarities between this? And started giving me more research to go on. And over time I realized that not only was there an abundant amount of information that could bring these two ideas together, but there were people who were looking for something deeper beyond just the strictly atheist, rationalist worldview that does sometimes lead people towards anarchy. Because I feel, and Samuel Konkin, the founder of agorism, which is the solution that I push and promote and believe in, said there is not one path to liberty. There is, a graph that we can create, but there's not one way towards freedom. So we're all going to find our way there differently. You may find it through your search for rational thinking and logic. You find freedom and you end up finding anarchy. But some of us like myself, find it in a very different way, in a very different path. My path towards an understanding of freedom and of spirituality, and my desire to promote that came from spending time incarcerated and being a victim of the drug war, but learning through that experience, and being involved in the prison system. Learning these things firsthand spurred me on towards learning about the world around me and then to reawakening my mind. So we all come at it in different ways. And I think it's all important. And so with the book, we're essentially asking, it's not for anyone to take up any type of religion or even to, that this is the one way. You must start meditating if you're going to be the right type of anarchist. If you want to get to this, no, we're not saying that. We're merely proposing a bunch of new ideas that we hope will spark a conversation to get people to think deeper about the traditional message of liberty, of freedom, of anarchy. And we call this position explorative agnosticism, which is basically the idea that an agnostic is somebody who doesn't take a position on whether God is real, basically whether God is knowable or not, for a number of reasons, whether they think that humans just don't have that capacity or it's just not of interest to them. So myself and John tend to take that worldview with reality itself. In the book, which I don't even have my own copy anymore, I traded it away. In the book, we have there's a quote that I take from this Polynesian shaman named Sergey King, and he describes a meadow, looking at a meadow from 4 different viewpoints, from 4 different worldviews, what he calls the objective, the subjective, the holistic, I can't remember the last one, but basically with each one, the first one, the objective, he's looking at it, and he describes the type of trees, the amount of plants, just all the physical characteristics. The subjective, he gets a little bit more involved. By the end of this, of looking at the same meadow, he experiences what it's like to be that flower that has the bee, sucking on him as, the whole thing, this experience. And some of you may have had those experiences through psychedelics, or deep states of meditation, flotation tanks, this connecting to all that is, And he basically says that these exist simultaneously, and from his worldview, and I tend to take this, that there is constantly a multiverse, a multi-layered reality going on right now, and I think that accounts for a lot of confusion between individuals and the way that they view the world. If you're talking to somebody from a purely objective standpoint, and you're over here more experiencing life in this, all is one, everything, when you communicate, you're going to be speaking a different language, and that accounts for a lot of miscommunication. That's the type of worldview that John and I take, so we're not really even out to prove that our worldview is the right world, because that doesn't really matter to us, because if I can have an experience to me, whether that's through meditation, riding my bike, an ayahuasca experience, a mushroom experience, all these psychedelic treatments that are coming back and having a revival, if I have an experience through that and it provides something of value to me, I really don't care whether or not you, in your worldview, consider it to be real or not. Because if it provides value to me and I gain learning and get to know myself deeper and can go through this process of healing, then I can get closer to knowing what freedom means to me in general. Because this is the objective here, is to, through our healing, our traumas, our insecurities, our doubts, our fears that we all have in different ways, we're learning to know ourselves better. By knowing yourselves better, you can know what freedom means to you, how that looks like in the real world with the other community around you. And also, getting back to state samsara and this idea of just a constant wave of statism, even if we escape this, say that we spread the message of freedom from the economics, the philosophical principles, all of the physical world understanding of what freedom means and these ideas, and those permeate the culture. If we don't work on our deeper level, those deeper parts of ourselves that need healing, we're going to create a world that, we may escape statism for a certain period of time, but after a while, those same issues are going to rise back up. We're just going to have a bunch of ego-filled anarchists running around thinking that they know everything, but they're not going to be healed. In the book we say the evolution without healing is a recipe for disaster, and that's what the conscious resistance is about, is getting us to consider these ideas of freedom, of anarchy, in the physical sense, but putting on a different lens when looking at them. And definitely, I advise an open mind. Just a couple other things I want to mention here. In the book, we also talked about, obviously, healing. Healing is pretty central to the message that I'm pushing here. And we just lay out a few different concepts and ideas for some healing methods that might not be considered by the average libertarian, voluntarist, anarchist. These include, as I've said a couple times, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy. Now, I know it may seem weird to some people that I'm advocating the use of drugs. I am a former drug addict, 10 years clean off crystal meth this year. And I fully understand the danger of these substances. I don't think that the government locking me up for a victimless crime, I mean, I was hurting myself only. I don't think that led to me to this path, but I chose to use that time to examine my life and to make a change out of it. And I met plenty of people who didn't do that and who are still living in that cycle. But I also gained so much insight throughout this experience of incarceration, probation, parole, and then eventually a felony and prison. Throughout that whole experience, because I took my experiences with LSD and with psilocybin very seriously, and I honestly, while I was locked up, I started to develop this idea, what I called at the time psychedelic Zen, which is a combination of a controlled setting trips with meditation, and really trying to develop like how to go through that process. It was based on Timothy Leary's book, The Psychedelic Experience, which was based on the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and basically the stages to go through death towards the new life in that bardo stage. So I kind of took all those ideas. I was already, understanding that even throughout my incarceration, I had already tried LSD and mushrooms, and definitely had abused them and pushed, went too far with it. And I could recognize that, okay, taking a 10 strip of acid just is not a good idea. It doesn't produce, the enlightenment I was seeking. But there were times whenever I was coming at it with respect and in the right setting, where I did gain huge insights and understanding into who I am as a person, and really just rearranged my worldview. So I was already open to these ideas, and then the more I started to understand them and study them, I realized that, hey, these substances, these plants, these teachers, which is what they are, have actually been respected, like not only in the Western world in the 40s, 50s, and 60s before they became illegal, but for millennia by indigenous people all around the world. I really started to, it's like, whoa, they've been telling me these things are gonna, I remember reading in the health class describing acid, and said you would see, you would taste colors and smell sounds. I was like, holy shit, I have to try this. That was the first thing I was like, okay, I'm going to try that one for sure. And luckily, I've always been connected to that world, so I've had plenty of experience with that. But, so I understand the power of in the right conditions and in the right frame of mind. Because again, I've definitely had experiences where I wasn't in a good place, and I thought to deal with my issues, eating a bunch of acid would somehow solve that. And then all those emotions that I'm dealing with come out throughout that trip. And that is a very crazy, traumatic experience, not only for you, but anyone who's around to witness that. Because you're like, oh my god, everything's coming out. You're okay, I'm fine. It's disturbing. But it's therapy, though. It's therapy. And I got plenty of therapy through that. So I understand these things. I also have had some experience with ayahuasca, which is a drink made in the Amazon by a number of different peoples, but it's another form of what some people may know as DMT, which DMT is pretty much the modern Western internet world's way of having ayahuasca, resynthesizing it into the chemical which is in your brain and which is present when you dream, when you sleep, when you die, when you're born, and then smoking it. It creates some very intense, short-lived experiences that, depending on your worldview, either take you to go visit some part of your mind or some other people, but they often want to tell it to you and give you lessons. They have things to say. It can be a very interesting experience. And with ayahuasca, it's beyond just sitting here and giggling with your friends. It's, in ceremonial, which I think is a really important aspect to this. And all these ideas are explored in the book. Just basically, I personally have interest in indigenous teachings and the message, the rawness and the beauty of that. For reasons of my own family history and trying to understand that better, learning from those of the Choctaw Nation in the last 2 years, and also just studying these cultures and seeing what they've been able to do in the past that the Western world has completely ignored. And for one, agriculture is a huge thing. And speaking of ayahuasca, the plant itself is a combination of a vine, boiling that vine, combining it with another plant. It's a very intensive process that these savages were somehow able to figure out, of all these thousands of plants in the rainforest, they knew which ones to take, the exact process, what to do to make this drink that can induce, hours-long, night-long visions, and people report healing experiences on it. So to me, that says that there is some knowledge there. To them, it's the pharmacy. When you ask them how they knew to make the plant, they said that the plants themselves, the teachers, told them how to. So I think that there's value in opening your mind, defocalizing your gaze to from your worldview to be able to consider other worldviews and to see that there are other aspects. And more I find when people start to open up to these ideas and do have, I'm focusing on psychedelics right now, but there's more other ways outside of ingesting things to create these changes within yourself. And this would include meditation, flotation tanks, which I've recently been going. I know Adam had his first flotation experience this past week, so it's go to Float Houston. Houston, they're awesome people, and that's another experience that can take you just to a deeper state of your mind. So the point here is these experiences allow you to either reflect and look at yourself outside of being in your own body, or to just have the space and time to get to that meditative state. Because you'd be amazed, and I hope that you will start to do this. If you can take even 5 minutes of your day, whether it's your morning or at night when you're going to bed, to just stop and to reflect on everything that took part throughout that day, and really to just go through it, you'd be surprised by the things that come back to your memory that you either forgot about, or just realizations, things that come to you when you take the time to stop, because we're so busy surrounding ourselves with all this technology and all this stuff to do and people to talk to, and I'm so guilty of this, and I've really been working on pulling back and following my own words, which is a really important thing to do. But yeah, so there's value in finding whatever meditation means to you. And for some, it makes sense to sit in lotus position, and to get into Buddhism or Zen or something like that. But for others, it can be listening to guided meditation videos on YouTube, or it can just be bicycling, or just sitting down in your favorite chair for 5 to 10 minutes and getting that time. It doesn't have to be, something really rigid. It's whatever you make it to be, but there's value in that. I'm not sure how long I'm going through this time right now, but you guys all right. So a couple other concepts that I want to cover that are just this is all coming from the book, and like I said, I'm going to pass around this in a few minutes if you're interested in getting a copy of the book. You can order it online right now, or you can download it for free to consciousresistance.com/book. The PDF is there, free to download, read on your phone, whatever. If you order it online, it's $5 or $6 plus shipping. But like I said, I'm waiting for that delivery. So if you want to sign up to get one tonight or tomorrow when it comes in, just write your name down and let me know how many copies you want, and I'll get it to you. But in the book, we also define the ideas of freedom, which I think you all understand. We define consciousness, spirituality, agorism, and anarchy, because these ideas are present and prevalent throughout the book, and we want to have a conversation where we understand each other. Spirituality, I think, is an important term to define, because it seems like it is one of those words that is very subjective and can be used in a number of different ways. And it is a word that doesn't have a common definition, which is interesting. As well as consciousness. Even people who study consciousness can't really decide on what they think it means, or where it's at, or what it is exactly. But spirituality is just a practice, again, like with meditation or with speaking, with anything that brings you closer to who you are, your essence, yourself, an experience that brings you closer to knowing yourself is what we describe that as. So whether that, you can have a spiritual experience through a relationship, a conversation with somebody, it can be a number of different things. And we're trying to create those moments to lead to healing experiences that allow us to know ourselves better, so that we can understand freedom better, so that then these ideas of anarchy all of a sudden look a lot more appealing when people aren't so worried or looking for a leader in government, or, and again, I don't think that we can create a utopian perfect world, but we can definitely create a world where violence is not the accepted norm in the form of government, where we can say that it's a wrong thing to commit violence no matter who it is, even if they work for the government. You know what I mean? That's what we're working towards, creating this more free society. And I really don't think we can do that, because I tend to see it like this. We are generally a reflection of all of ourselves. This is another idea that we consider in the book. There's an essay called "Are We Really All One? Collectivism versus Individuality." And it looks at the ideas of individual anarchism and just individuality in general, compared to collectivism, which is more with the ideologies of communism and socialism, but in general, collectivism, the idea that the collective is more important than the individual. And I think there's value in finding ways to work together as a collective in voluntary forms, but with, obviously absent coercion, absent force. Yeah. But you can't forget the power of the individual, that the individuals are the ones making up that collective. And so we look at these ideas, and one really powerful example that I feel connects, again, the spiritual side to the anarchist philosophy is the jeweled net of Indra. The jeweled net of Indra is like a parable from Buddhism about the god Indra. And Indra basically is described as having this net that extended into all directions infinitely. And it was made up of individual shining diamonds that were shown together and connected to other shining diamonds. So within this, it's it's talking about the interdependence and the interconnectivity of all of our life. We're each one of those individual shining diamonds that's beautiful on its own and powerful in its strength, but we're also reflecting each other, and we're all connected and working together. So the individual is just as important as that bigger whole. And I think that that's really important to remember as we move towards this more free state, because one of the things we're talking about in the book as well is often I feel like those who maybe you understand the message of freedom, liberty, voluntarism, anarchy, and you jive with that, and you've been interested in meditation, you've been kind of interested in these spiritual concepts and consciousness, but every time you go towards that crowd, you hear this statist kind of communist like rhetoric where they're like, yeah, we need a world government to save us, and all these type of things where they're good people, but maybe they don't understand the political side of that enough to get what the solutions are calling for, because it's often wrapped up in that statist rhetoric. And at the same time, there's people who already are aware of this battle going on. Maybe to them it's a spiritual battle, and they feel like they're bringing light and power to this world already, even though they don't know the names and the faces of all the people who are behind things. They don't know bills, and they don't really pay attention, but they're generally good people who want a better world, and they also probably are into sustainability and gardening, but they're kind of scared of looking at these big scary concepts. And so the idea is to bridge these worlds together to find that there is common ground, that we can bring people together who have an interest in spiritual concepts, who again I think are already primed for looking at health solutions. They're already generally primed for gardening, for sustainability, for homesteading. Those type of people want to work in that regard. And I feel like I want to encourage more of the people who understand the philosophy side to start living the philosophy. And this is where the ideas of agorism come in. In the chapter, I basically outline our ideas of anarchy. It's called panarchy, anarchy without adjectives, towards panarchy. Panarchy is basically the idea that individuals who believe in anarchy, which is self-governance, it's not chaos, in case you were unaware. I still hear them say that on TV shows, anarchy.
Yeah.
No, it won't be. But so the individuals who say like I'm a free individual, I'm a self-governing individual, and I'm going to engage voluntarily with these other individuals, and we're going to build a community where we all agree upon these things, we're going to do these things. And you can have a number of these communities even living next to each other, but under different governance. That's the idea of anarchy, coexisting. So it really came from the ideas of anarchy without adjectives, anarchy without hyphens, or synthesis anarchism, which started in Europe and then came to America in like the late 50s, early 60s throughout the 70s, and basically the creation of the modern day Libertarian Party, where the same struggles have been going on forever. In Europe it was the anarcho-communists against the anarcho-syndicalists and individualists, and in America it was the anarcho-individualists against the anarcho-communists. And there was all this division, like even in people who understood that the government was a problem, they still just wanted to argue about, in this theoretic future, who was already right. And that creates a lot of problems, and we want to start from there. And so some thinkers, Spanish thinkers, came along and said, look, we recognize that the state is the problem, we recognize that the state's colluding with these corporate entities, we can see all the ways it comes back to them. Let's focus on that now and not worry about the economic or social arrangements just yet until that's even a realistic thing to deal with. And so those ideas spread. They came to America, and in the 60s, Carl Hess, who was a really awesome person, I think who deserves more credit to his work. He started out as a speechwriter, and then he moved more towards a radical direction, but I really have a lot of respect for him, because in that really volatile time period of activism, this emerging groups of, like, on the left, Black Panthers, and then the new right, all these young activists all over the place, they were working on bridging the gap between those who were going towards the left, the anti-war crowd, and some of the other new right people, and he was really trying to spread that message. So he came up with anarchy without hyphens, is what he called it. And in the book, there's a really great quote from him on him just describing how an individual who wants to be free is already an anarchist, whether you call yourself that or not. An anarchist can be a Christian, an anarchist can be somebody who is a hippie, an anarchist. He lays out all these examples that don't really matter. That's not important to what the ideas and the principles are about. That's what I've always loved and valued about these type of experiences. And when I first started getting involved with activism, it wasn't that I was finding a bunch of people that looked just like me. It was that I was finding people who didn't look anything like me, and they really didn't even care what I looked like. They were just like, there's some badass stuff going on, we need to do something about it, and we need to get some shit done. And so that's what we were doing, and that's, to me, is what's beautiful about freedom, is it brings all kinds of people together. And ultimately I think anarchy, when better understood, and when these ideas spread and people stop calling anarchy chaos on TV, we'll get past that. So we just laid a case out for that, for let's get past the divisiveness, and in there I find a common ground is with the ideas of agorism and mutualism. Mutualism is a really old idea that has historical roots in the first anarchist, Pierre Proudhon from France. He talked about mutualism and basically mutual credit banks, mutual aid societies, and basically everything that people don't want government doing, the community replacing that, doing it better than. So those ideas were already there in the 1700s. He was laying the ground for that. And then in the 1960s and 70s, Samuel Conkin wrote the New Libertarian Manifesto and the Agorist Primer, and then some of his other collected writings have been put out and put other places. But he talked about agorism, and the agorism comes from the agora, the marketplace, Greek word for the marketplace. And basically, beyond just simply calling for open exchanges, free voluntary exchanges for individuals, his philosophy, I believe, was radical, not only because he recognized that the word libertarian originally was a left position, and rightly should be, and that these people that a lot of common or modern anarchists and libertarians associate with were actually hijacking the word and shifting it to a new direction. He wanted to establish this very specific position of left libertarianism, or what he was calling new libertarian, or simply an agorist or a counter-economist, because he said that that he just didn't want to work with the conservatives, the paleo-conservatives at the time. So he started laying out this really radical strategy. He said, well, look, let's just work in the economy that the state doesn't want to go to, the area that the state says is illegal, or the average person is afraid to work in, right? So this is your black and gray markets. He also had a term for red markets, and the word black market just sounds, people think dangerous, criminals, violence, things like that. So anything that involved violence would be known as red market. And then you've got the white market, like the white collar guys, and pink market is white market crime, the white collar crime, violent crime, pink market. But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of divisions of that. But basically he lines it up and says that we can create a new economy, not to rebuild the country or to harken back to the Constitution, although individual communities are fine to do that, and people are fine to make new things if they want. But basically his idea is we're not going to fight the state. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. Anybody who's been paying attention the last couple of years, the militarization of the police, and anytime protesters get a little out of hand, rubber bullets come out and things like that. I mean, that's not a realistic possibility. Also, it seems pretty obvious to me, and probably increasingly obvious to those here, that voting isn't going to fix the situation. And so Conkin's looking at that and saying, okay, if we can't vote them out, we can't fight them out, then we can compete with them. We can they're a part of the market as well. Let's create new institutions that are doing the service better than them. So in the black market, that would be, this again, voluntary, but this would be like selling weapons illegally, voluntary prostitution, drug selling, anything that you can think of that the government typically says is illegal. And gray market would be like, I own a gardening business without a license. We agree to do work together. I come, I do the work, you hand me some cash or whatever, maybe silver, maybe barter, whatever. And that is a totally legit transaction, but it's keeping, even better than just using the Federal Reserve note tax-free is to get off the Federal Reserve note. And that's one of the things that, again, John Bush inspired me and plenty of other people by getting people to realize that if you want to end the Fed, you have to stop using the Fed. So you have to invest in Bitcoin or alternative currencies, new ideas like that, barter, silver, things that, so you're literally taking the money out of that status economy and creating a whole new economy. And so his idea was, he outlines 4 stages towards the creation of, the agora. And basically, where we're at now is like, statism is everywhere, and there's tiny pockets of individuals who are thinking freely spread out. And more, these individuals are moving towards getting land together, towards intentional communities, towards establishment. So the agoras are being built, and this is what he was predicting was going to happen, is that the agoras would pop up, you have all these communities, they get stronger, as the state gets weaker economically, many people see that happening. As that situation happens, you can either be left with the choice of let the collapse come, they wait for FEMA to come help you, that's your choice. Or you can go loot and riot the streets and have fun doing that. I know some people see that on TV and think that's like their ideal situation. I think they're a little misguided. Or, you can come hang out with the crazy people down the block who've been telling you that they've been growing their own food and had their own community and doing all this stuff. And maybe they can come and give you a box of seeds so you can get yourself started in some food. And those people who are already doing it will be able to soften the blow not only for themselves but for the others in the community. So this is the ideas of agorism, is creating the counter economy, feeding that. So support entrepreneurs who are working without licenses, support people who are putting themselves out there. We need more entrepreneurs. We need to encourage this so that we can create more in this economy. And you can see it happening, and Tonkin outlined it in the Soviet Union. You can see it happening in North Korea. In China, there's a huge black market. It exists all over the world. It's just a strategy. It's the specific strategy that will get us there. And of course, we need more education on these ideas. I'm going to start to wrap this up, but a couple brief things that we go over in the book as well. We talk about animal rights, animal consciousness, plant consciousness, explore those concepts, and kind of look at the different positions from the very extreme, like the ALF, Animal Liberation Front, that's willing to free animals and burn down facilities, to individuals who couldn't care less what their food had injected in there, or what it was treated like, or where it came from, and trying to find balance. And then again, to those who don't care anything about the planet or the environment, or the consequences of their action, to those like the ELF, Earth Liberation Front, who are willing to burn down factories, live in trees, and do all kinds of. So you have these really wide viewpoints, and we're trying to find a balance between that. How can we coexist with the rest of life on this planet? We also look at the controversial subject of feminism in a chapter called Balancing the Feminine and the Masculine, which I think we do a great job of outlining in anarcho-feminist history of how to push for equality for all people without using the state. And not only that, but balancing between the two polarities that we seem to have, and everything in between, and out between, and all over, all kinds of whatever you want to be. And in the second part of the book, we basically bring these ideas together. We look at the synthesis, intersection of anarchy and Buddhism, anarchy and the Tao. There's actually, Rothbard wrote quite a bit about the Tao and libertarianism. You can find some of that. So we bring those. We actually have a couple of guest essays from Davy Barker, who wrote a book called Voluntary Islam, and that looks at the intersection of anarchy and Islam, and I think you'd be surprised if you read that part. Also Christianity, and the possibility, more than likely, that Jesus was an anarchist, and the only known time that Jesus ever took up his hand to anybody and ever got angry was on the bankers, the money changers. He knew what was going on. And if you look at his messages, also just look through the history of Christianity and see how much the message has been changed or shifted or censored by different people, and maybe pursue some of those other books. You can kind of get a fuller feel for what he was trying to say, and essentially was the non-aggression principle, which is doing to others. And that's how we're really going to be able to live free, is if we can get people to respect each other in that basic form. And the last part of the book, we look at real-life examples of anarchist communities existing. One of them is Zomia, which is kind of controversial whether or not it still exists or not, but it's basically a landmass the size of Europe and Southeast Asia that, for all intents and purposes, probably ended in the 1950s, but for hundreds of years was this community of people living up in the hills and in the valleys where the state couldn't or wouldn't go into, and forming communities that were specifically anti-state. Their spirituality, their agriculture, everything was built around living in these environments. It wasn't, they saw the state down there, but they chose to stay away from it. And this book, it's called The Art of Not Being Governed, really explores that, and the concept that this myth that we've been told that, eventually kings and queens rose up, and we realized we didn't want to be out here facing all this crazy stuff, so we voluntarily, submitted ourselves to this rule of these people, and that's just evolved, and that's why we're, underneath this rule. Instead of showing us the true picture that there have been people, including in America, who resisted the encroachment of this governance and who've only wanted to live free, who just wanted to coexist, and we can see that in Native American Indian struggles, and there's some good information in the book on that. But yeah, that's the concept, guys. I think that if we're going to create a more free world, we have to not only understand the physical aspect of the philosophy of freedom, of anarchism, of voluntarism, the non-aggression principle, and the ideas of agorism and counter-economics and all these things, but again, I feel like no matter how well we know that and spread that message without getting to know ourselves better and to heal through these individual traumas and really coming together as a community, voluntarily of course, and doing this healing, then we're likely to create something a bit darker than we're ready for. So, I hope that you guys are ready to take that journey on your own. That's the journey that I'm on, and it's a hell of a journey, and I'm looking forward to finding out where this freedom can go. Thank you guys for listening. The books are selling for $7, so if you want to get one, write your name and info here, and then I'll give it to you later. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. You got Good friend Adam Kokesh now.
All right, come on, one more time to the guy who made this event possible. Please give it a Derrick Broze. All right, any questions?